And we're back. So, yeah, these are the plot points or holes, I could say, that kind of didn't add up. I get a sense that yes, they wanted to build tension and lead us to believe as spectators that she could be mentally unbalanced. She could be suffering from some kind of mental issue. We see that of the entire community, practically, she's one of the few that don't have children. And Margaret, who did have one particular son, loses him, or he passes or dies, and she is kind of left distraught. And they all kind of blame her, almost kind of shame her, like, well, that happens to her for going too far past the border. She knew that it was dangerous, and whatever the case may be. And also when they're all at some kind of get together as a community, and I think it's Frank's home that he shares with his wife. I think played here. Hold on a second. Yes, Frank's wife is Shelley, played by Gemma Chan. She has a plethora of work, and I think she was in Crazy Rich Asians. Beautiful, beautiful, statuesque actress, and she's all well put together. In fact, she's the one that does like the ballet instruction. You know, she's very giving you very Martha Graham, American ballet, and training the ladies how to, pose, giving me very Black Swan vibes and whatnot. But as they're all gathered together, there is an instance where Margaret, who's played by Kiki Lane, she seems a little out of it, and her husband is in the middle of giving her like some kind of like pills to keep her quiet. So there's a lot of that going on. Something's bubbling over. And not for nothing, also, so Bunny's husband, Dean, is played by Nick Kroll. Tell me y'all weren't thinking Big Mouth, because it's like that voice, his voice. I've loved him since his VH1 days. So, I'm one of those longtime fans. He's always been known for his shtick. And to kind of see him in this very kind of like mature, serious role, very Mad Men. And you get a lot of that, like a lot of punches of Mad Men, even down to the furniture and the background. Everything feels very much of that time period. But he's not playing the comedian here. He's like best friends to Harry Styles' character of Jack Chambers, and they're in each other's homes. They know each other like the back of each other's hands. They know their quirks. They know how to relax together. And Olivia Wilde is giving me very like, typical housewife with the cigarette. She has the kids. She has the two kids and the white picket fence, but she still prefers to, look pretty and have a nice little martini glass. And then we start realizing that there's something wrong. Something has gone askew. And then, especially when they have, there's an instance, she has a breakdown. She practically begs her husband, Jack, to, like, let's just run away. Let's get out of here. There's something wrong here. I don't trust this man. Frank, he's, something's off about him in that coupling with his wife. So he agrees, and they all kind of they both run into the car, and all the cars are fabulous too, very Aston Martin, very, again, very to that feel for the 50s. But he stops himself in his tracks, even though, and she's still very much in that Susie homemaker, that's what I was trying to say in the last video, vibe. I packed some snacks, in case, the drive is really far, but let's get going. And then all of a sudden he just keeps apologizing and apologizing. She's like, and you already know. As a spectator, I was like, girl, this is not going to end well for you. He did something. And lo and behold, they drag her out like these like henchmen in like these red jumpsuits and grab her out of the car, take her to something that looked like a psych ward. And she's in some kind of like room where there's like this bright light, very, one who flew over the cuckoo's nest. And we've had instances of like that, like of electric shock therapy, which I'm sure that they induced on a number of women. For centuries, they've always categorized women who are too outspoken, that they have mental health issues, and the best way to silence them is either through electric shock or through medication that just kind of keep them in this zombie state. And though when she had suffered, like that was her first instance of shock, was when she saw her neighbor off herself. She just slit her throat, and she threw herself off the roof of the top of the roof of her house. That's what sent her through a tailspin, our Alice character. And there was already a doctor there ready to prescribe. And again, this was not so far-fetched, because this happened to a number of women of that decade, of that period, that era, that if you had any kind of issue, they would prescribe like millions of pills to you without even caring how that was going to have long-term effects. So we're still very much on the brand of how women were abused over decades, and their words weren't taken seriously. And not for nothing, there is a differentiation between mental health issues and actual, like, malpractice, because that's what you're seeing. It's just people prescribing things like they're Tic Tacs, taken like candy. But yeah, she's being induced with electric shock therapy, and it's a violent scene, very reminiscent of Jack Nicholson. If you haven't seen that film, I do recommend you watch it. And even Asylum, if you're a big Ryan Murphy fan, we see Sarah Paulson. Also, I think it's supposed to be kind of reminiscent of that time period as well, 50s and 60s, and that was just the way they dealt with it. Too chatty, too outspoken, too, thinking outside the box. And we see a very violent scene. And again, every actress or actor who's been faced with such a scene have really pulled it off. And she gets red and real puffy. It's really believable. It looks really agonizing. The way they shot it too is very traumatizing. And then she kind of goes through some form of therapy, pill induced, I'm sure. She comes back. But again, there's those instances where she's still being like nudged by Frank's character. Very reminiscent of Trump. Again, I'm not politicizing my channel, but that arrogance and that, privileged way of thinking, and that I'm going to dominate you someday. I don't know. I don't know if that was his operative at the end of it, if he just wanted to like finally sleep with her. And even if he could, I don't know, because all of this is programmed. So we later see that everything kind of supposedly goes back to normal, but then her husband comes back from work and he starts humming. And again, every time that he hums a particular song, it kind of like triggers her memory, and it's like a glitch. It goes into like this glitch in the program, and she starts realizing something is wrong, and then she starts piecing it together, and we start getting kind of like that Get Out, Sixth Sense, like a revelation of what is really going on. And we see that this is a made-up world. It's not real life. And all the husbands that get in their cars and go to supposedly some marvelous job are really exiting the program, having to really live their life how they really live their life. And then we follow Harry Styles, Jack's character, into the real world. We have an instance of what he really goes through. He's technically a bum. Like, he was already kind of lacking in real life because he wasn't cutting it in real life. While his mother might as well have been his wife, who's played by Florence Pugh, our Alice. She's a doctor, so it made sense why also that urgency to want to help, because that's innate in her. And even though he's programmed her so that she could be Susie Bake Susie Homemaker, her instincts are still very much there. She knows something's wrong, and he was already kind of going through like job loss and whatever. She's willing to pick up more shifts, but he just wasn't coming through for her as a man. So that's why they were probably unhappy. He came across this crazy, programming pyramid scheme, I'm sure, and was like, this is ideal. In that way I can keep her and keep her happy, and I'm like a king here. And she surrenders to me. It's just a fantasy world to kind of keep her in this little, box and keep her perfect. And he's the ideal partner, and she should never want to ever leave. And he stole her time, he stole her will and her consent, because she didn't even know she had been under this weirdo programming, induced however the hell it was induced. That we don't have a clear understanding. And then they kind of put like these wire like things, laser things that feed into her eyeball, and very reminiscent of like Clockwork Orange. Again, we see instances of great films in this film. And then like his only job is like to maintain her healthy and hydrated. No wonder, like, she starts questioning, like, where is this food coming from? This perfect food is constantly being cooked, but I don't go to the supermarket. Like, things weren't adding up. And that's why, even though she's in the program, she's questioning, she's inquisitive. She's like, what's going on here? Things don't make sense. They all also, when they're together, they start discovering that they all have like nearly the same stories of how each coupling met. And it's like, again, that was like the programming to get into this program. And yeah, you can see how Harry in his real life, how he really looks, and he looks like a bum. And he has to like, hydrate her and everything. Her eyes are like literally static open like that. Like, it does, I don't even know if poor girl can even blink. But and then he enters the program. And as he enters the program, he doesn't look like a bum. He doesn't look like Scuzz. He, has his hair all like nicely trimmed, and he has the nice suit and everything. He has a nice little accent. In real life, he doesn't. In the movie, he doesn't have the accent, but in this programming, he does. And then it also explains why they have like this like idealized relationship. Every time he comes home, they practically have sex. But interesting note that I think a lot of reviewers also took notice is that he's always pleasing her. And you kind of wonder, like, oh, that's wonderful. Like, constantly it's always like the other way around. Women have to please their husbands. But he pleases her because I think it's less of a hassle if he is able to interact with her in intercourse-wise. Then he would have to clean up his own mess as he exits. You know what I mean? So that's why he's never seen like actually having sex with her. He's just pleasing her all the time. So it's like, aha. And the thing is that this is where I say it's very Matrix, Black Mirror. If they hurt you in the programming, you die, or you die in the programming, you die in real life. So she did hurt him by mistake, although it was a struggle, and he was like practically like, clawing at her to not leave him. And so she breaks something over his head. Blood is spilt all over. Now people are realizing that she's crazy or whatever the case may be. And then it's revealed that Bunny, although Bunny has been playing as if she didn't know what was going on, between Bunny and Shelley, they both knew that they were in a program. And Bunny had chose that life because maybe in her real life she had her 2 children and unfortunately may have lost them. And so in the programming, she can be a mom, forever a mom, and in this idealized world. So she gave consent to live like that, but every other wife that was in there was suckered in there and didn't know, and they hadn't given their consent. So when things start revealing, they'd tell her to run. And here was the problem that I didn't understand, because it's leading up to this, like this big chase, and it just becomes an action film all of a sudden. Again, this is highly entertaining. But as she's like flooring it in this Aston Martin beautiful car, and then she has like these henchmen that look like the Matrix, like all those crazy, duplicates or whatever of the Matrix, they're so close to her. I was like, nobody has a gun? Like, again, I'm not promoting violence, You know, I'm trying to stay clear of that. But I'm like, they could have easily, like, come on, man. Like, this would have been the Matrix. Come on. So nobody would, like, they were just like bumping into her, which that didn't make sense. Like, certain things, that's why I said there were little plot holes here and there that didn't kind of go together. But it built up tension and it was hella entertaining. But yeah, we're just kind of left off like we're assuming that she did make it and she's out of the program. But it is kind of like left up to your imagination for you to end, which I love. I love films like that anyway. But entertaining. There are just a few little things here and there. A lot of people were like, "Oh, they didn't have a good payoff," but I think it did. I will agree with other viewers that they could have turned this into a series, and maybe there's a potential here. I mean, it's getting a lot of rave reviews. It did really well in Cannes, and I think it's drawn a lot of attention, especially with all the scandal. But I think there's potential here. If they were to turn that into a series for Netflix or something, or HBO Max, I think they're onto something. So, something to think about. But I thought it was a great watch. It's 2 hours and change, but I think it's definitely worth it. You know, if you're not doing anything on a weekend, on a chilly weekend, I highly recommend it. I give it 2 nerdy girl review thumbs up, and watch it today. It's currently streaming on HBO Max, and I want to say the soundtrack is phenomenal. I love all the classics. You know, there were a few that were like, you know, where you heard them, you know, from. Come on. It's synonymous with the Cosby Show. I know now that has a lot of controversy.